we're leading on to our last presenter for the night. This woman has done many badass things before, but on this trip she decided to strike off to go solo. And I would like to introduce to you Adrien Rawley.
Thanks, Dave. Hi. I want to say first off, please feel free to move around. We've all been sitting for a while, so whether you're at home, on your sofa, or here, please feel free to move. I'm not be upset. My name is Adrien Rawley, and I'm deeply honored to be here. I remember the first Night of Adventure 37 episodes ago in the library pub in Wolfville. There were 12 of us. It was awesome. And it's Jared, right? Go for it. I would like to just start with a moment of gratitude that we are all here together, that we are all on the unceded, ancestral, and unsurrendered territory of the Mi'kmaq people. And I have the great honor of getting to know this land far, far, far more deeply than I did before I set out on this trip. And I want to say thank you to this opportunity to share this story. It was quite the trip itself to go through my photos for the first time in many months. And gratitude to all of my foremothers and aunties that I know and do not know, and all of us as women and women-identifying people who are working very hard to find equality in this world and adventure. So thank you all for listening to these stories. I'm so inspired from that last one. I can't believe I'm going to talk now. Thank you. So to begin, where do ideas come from? I'm just going to give this one. Where do ideas come from? I don't really know. I have had the great honor of being part of many trips. Sometimes they start with a bottle of wine and a map on the wall. This particular trip, so this was just this past autumn in September 2020, and we all know what 2020 has and has not been. And this photo was taken by my dear housemate Adam, who's here. We went out for a little average canoe adventure on a weeknight, I think it was, and I was in this mindset of like, I really want to go on a big trip, and I've been on a big trip for 4 years, and I was like feeling kind of mopey, and so I had a gin and tonic and a bag of chips. And my dog was just hanging out there too, and I was in this like really funny mind space of, well, you know, I was supposed to do this stuff, and like all these, like, I had these contracts with the C school, and like COVID, and I was gonna like do this stuff with prevention and COVID, and I had set up for my season of gardening that I would be out of range for 4 weeks of the summer because of contracts. And this picture was taken either right before or right after the realization that I wasn't doing any of these contracts, and that I had 4 weeks of my summer that I had booked off to work, but now I wasn't going to be working. So I could thread those 4 weeks together into one lump and go on a trip. And all it took was Adam asking me, when is your trip? So we just looked at the phone, and this picture was taken like July 15th or 16th, and then I left on my trip 6 weeks later. So this particular trip, I'm going to go over the route in a second. I already had somehow that I had friends ask if I wanted to go hike at Cape Chignecto because they had never been, and they asked if I would go because I had gone a few times. I said, sure, that was Labor Day weekend. And then I also had on the books, like, oh, the Fundy Footpath in New Brunswick. I always wanted to do that. That had already been kind of chatted about. So I kind of had these 2 hiking trips sort of on the radar. And then the idea of like, well, maybe if I have 4 weeks, maybe I could just like bike to Cape Chignecto, why not? And then I have like at least a week-long trip, that's cool. And then I was like, well, wait a minute, how long would it take me to bike from like Cape Chignecto to Fundy? Because that's in New Brunswick, like can't be that far. And so then I looked at the distance, I was like, well, that's all right. And then it was like, well, I like loops, and like, well, Bay of Fundy, like there's a ferry and I like boats, so why don't I just make a loop around the Bay of Fundy? And we had this maritime bubble thing going, the Atlantic bubble, so there was freedom and we were enjoying the privilege of COVID-free times, sort of. And I felt as a cyclist, I wasn't going to be too disruptive and I would be perceived as very safe. And I was very isolated, so what the heck. So there were these gifts of COVID, I couldn't do my normal job, so I could suddenly go on this trip. My motivations were, I really want to go on an adventure and just like go see stuff and learn about my own backyard, because so many times trips are far away and really exotic. And I just wanted to see my own corner of the world. And I wanted to be simple. I didn't want to deal with shuttles. I didn't want to deal with logistics that were insane. I just wanted to go, and I didn't want to wait to see if anybody else could do the whole thing. I just wanted to make sure it would happen. But because of this like accessible kind of close range approach in the route, people could maybe join, is what I was looking for. So I hope the color is better for you because it looks very white for me. This is the route that wound up happening. And I currently live in Gasper Valley. And so the plan was to leave from Gasper Valley and bike as close to the shoreline as it could to that blue squiggle, Cape Chinecto. How many people have hiked Cape Chinecto? Yeah. And then to get back on my bike and bike all the way around Bay of Fundy down to that blue line that is the Fundy Footpath. Who's hiked the Fundy Footpath? Get back on my bike after hiking the Fundy Footpath and then go around, make my way down to St. John, putter across the Bay of Fundy on a boat, and then bike myself all the way back home to do a big ass circle. That was not a circle. So the planning, I still have this. I just found it in my hutch in my room. And this was like, I had to figure out if this was actually feasible. So really just boiled down to math. How long would it take me to get from my home to Cape Chinecto? About 7 days, biking about 60 kilometers every day, all right. And then how many days it would take to do Chinecto, all right. And then how many days would it take me to get to New Brunswick, Fundy Footpath, all right. That's gonna take 7 days plus stop and visit some friends, okay. And then it wound up to be a month that I could be gone for. And it was, I had a month to play with. So it all kind of lined up really organically, and I had to do this ridiculous kind of visual approach to make sure it all lined up and to book places that I would need to be. And the logistics were amazingly simple, because I wasn't going to bike with my hiking stuff, there's no way. And I wasn't going to hike with my biking stuff, no way. So what I wound up doing was that my comrades that were going to come join me to hike Cape Chinecto, before I left for my trip, you can go to the next picture, I pre-packed all of my stuff. And the house was a disaster. Like, it was mayhem. There was just piles of shit everywhere. Pardon me. There was stuff everywhere. And, you know, I was dehydrating food, and I was, like, putting together repair kits, and there was just all the stuff everywhere all over the living room. And I was able to get all of my hiking gear together and to deliver to Jane and the crew that would meet me in Chinecto so that I could bike there. They would show up with my hiking stuff. I'd stuff my bike in the car. We'd go hiking. They brought me fresh clothes that I would pre-pack so I could change out of my stinky stuff. And then they would take all my dirty hiking stuff back to Halifax, get it washed so that it could then get in a car to come back to Fundy when I was ready to go hiking for the next leg. And bring new bike stuff for after that. Like, so it actually was very simple. I just had to be really organized beforehand. Food, so I've never done a solo bike trip before. I've never done a front country biking trip before. I've gone like off until Labrador, and there was no resupply, so I was used to cycling all my food for a week. This was like, no, I don't have to do that. I can just bring little bits. And so I had to really be disciplined to try and shave off as much weight as I could. And I'm not like an ultra light camper person at all. So it was kind of hard, but I really enjoyed the challenge. Gear, like I don't really want to spend a ton of time about the nitpicky stuff and like technicalities of what I brought and what I didn't bring. I am so delighted to have conversations with people if you want to talk about this stuff. Like, come see me. I can give you my email address or phone. Like, please, that'd be very open to talking about this stuff, but not in this trip. So I'm gonna just move us along. That's cool. So this is a picture of everything that I took on my bike. It all spread out, looks like a yard sale, which is what I looked like every day, at least twice a day. And the beauty of traveling by yourself is it doesn't matter. You could be a disaster and nobody cares because there's no one there. You can just be a disaster and drink coffee and it's fine. And I'm not much of a tech person, kind of a dinosaur, but in my spirit of traveling alone, I realized that I couldn't do everything. It would be way easier if I didn't have to try and figure everything out, because I couldn't figure out what I was going to do for 36 days ahead of time. So I, for the first time ever, on my crappy little phone, got data, which was cool. And so I basically had my crappy little phone in a waterproof bag and data, so I could like use Google Maps and load up my routes, so I would have an idea where I was going, sort of enough. Most of it was like, just keep going left along the shore. And so I didn't really have to be super high tech. I'm not on Facebook, I'm not on Twitter, I'm not on Instagram, so that like wasn't really my thing to worry about. Adam again was like bike captain of the province, hooked me up with this great website called Ride with GPS, and I had the link embedded in here, but we're gonna just keep going. But you can remember Ride with GPS is this fantastic tool for plotting out routes, gives you all your distances, it gives you elevation profiles, which I don't recommend looking at beforehand, especially when you're gonna go ride for 36 days, which I did still find several hills that I will mention. But it's a really powerful tool that you can use, like the free version, or you can pay a bit of money every month, like the super duty version that my map actually was generated on. Thank you, Adam. So what to bring, what not to bring. Basically what to bring is as minimal as possible, but certain things that I really do like to bring are a sundress, chocolate, coffee, and a sarong. It's like very versatile. And you don't have to be a woman wearing sarongs, because having a piece of fabric is really great. And what not to bring is like books and heavy stuff and all the usual things you shouldn't bring. But again, I'm happy to talk about specifics another time. So the opportunity, I'm going on this trip, cool, holy smokes, I'm gonna go on this trip, okay. And then for me, with this whole COVID thing and thinking about all of the people that didn't have the ability or the privilege to be able to just check out their lives for 4 weeks and wander about and be free like me, I really bumped into this feeling of, and actually there was a conversation with Jan on the phone, of this would be a missed opportunity to not share it to some capacity. So kind of came up with this question, like, do I blog, is that a thing that people still do? I don't know. What is the intention of this trip for me? And I love to write, I always have. And I decided that I wanted to share as much as I could in my own words of the place that I was traveling, while a lot of people were really not able to go very far at all. So again, we're not doing external links, I'm told, but Adventurous Journeys is a platform that I've been developing over a long time in my brain, but in actuality as a website as of just for this trip, and it now exists. Adventurous as in one who's adventurous and is a bit like a goddess. So that's where the idea from that came from. And it was a great motivation to get myself together to have a platform to host a blog. So it's a pretty rudimentary website. It's out there. That became my blog for the whole trip. So again, the route, just crashed through this very quickly. From home with that little circle, it was going to be 7 days, 333 kilometers to get myself to Cape Chignecto. It was going to take 3 days and roughly 43 kilometers to hike Cape Chignecto. Then it was going to take me 10 days, including some rest days at a friend's farm over in New Brunswick to get all the way around to Fundy Footpath, and then hike the Fundy Footpath for 4 days, 47 kilometers, and then bike myself around through St. John on a boat, back to the Gaspereau Valley for another 7 days, 451 kilometers, for a grand total of 1,198.2 kilometers. So I was really stoked that it was going to be like 1,000 kilometers more, because it just seemed really tidy and cool. So that was what I was going to set out to do, and I had no idea how it would go. And that would be, I wanted to show you how sweet the Rider GPS thing is and all its little doodads. Anyway, day one, and I'm not gonna go over every single day with all of this nitty gritty, but I love this picture because it's so bad. This is like, you know, there's any trip that any of us go on, whether it's for a weekend or a year, it's like that haggard, zany feeling of pulling all your stuff together, thinking about it, forgetting stuff, remembering stuff, doing errands, like calling people, trying to remember all the stuff you need to remember, and then you finally, all you have to do is start. Okay. And so off you go, you're gonna go do this thing. And for me, going solo from my yard was really tricky. It's like I'm just starting from this place that I like to work from and go to the store from. It was crazy, like nothing was different from what I always did, except I had a lot more stuff on my bike. And so I just wanted to share kind of the format that helped me document each day that I wrote. I committed to blogging every single day, and I had never done that before. I always had a trip blog. But I always would write a haiku, and I don't really know where that tradition came from years ago, many trips ago. And I'd always document, like, so my first day, I made my first 60 kilometers, and I made it to Somerville Beach. And I did it. The funniest part, which is what the Bay Friendly offers, because of these big, long, muddy, rivery kind of habitats, is on the first day, my whole 60 kilometers, being so exhausted because I'm finally getting on the road, I biked, and finally, ultimately wound up exactly back, right across the water from a place that's 10 kilometers from my house. And I was like, wow, I just worked my butt off, and I can see Blue Beach from right here. So anyway, so I always record my distance, I always record the weather, and then what I eat, because that's actually really important. And it's an incredible way to remember and transport yourself right back to what you experienced when years go by. And it's amazing how you can vividly record it. So I am a huge believer in recording things. So maybe my first day I was super stoked. I wake up after sleeping, and I'm like, I'm waking up on trip. Okay, I'm actually doing this whole thing. And eating was very much the theme of my journey, and eating everything and anything I could. And I wound up at this fantastic restaurant called the Flying Apron in Somerville, and I found this, I have like a silly sense of humor. I was a dad in a past life. And I don't know, this card just says margin of error 19 times out of 20, and I love butter more than just about anything else in the world. And I was like, this is why I'm on this trip, is because there's funny stuff. There is weird, funny stuff, and you just get to be open. When you're on a bike, you're just wide open to the world. And it became real. Like the first day of waking up on trip, it is totally real. And it got really real the next day. So my route actually carried me through all of the very pivotal places that our province and the country and the rest of the world was able to suddenly know about from our shooting in April. And there was a huge theme in my trip of people sharing everything with me. And because I was one person and wide open, both in my spirit, but also in being not in a car, sitting on the side of the road, people would tell me everything. And this particular day of traveling through Porta Peak really set the stage for the depth of what awaited me on my 36 days of this adventure. And if I feel really compelled to share one of my blog entries, and so I'm going to read kind of a stitched together piece of it. I know we're going to have to be aware of time, but it just feels really important. So if you could switch to the next slide, and I'm just going to read. And I may cut myself short, but it just, the writing was what wound up becoming, it became the reason that I was out there. And it was really, really powerful for me. So we'll just read until I don't feel like reading anymore. Not exactly an early start. It was close to noon by the time I wheeled out of the bushes, headed for the garbage can in the park. An older fellow was taking in the scene and we exchanged hellos. Danny, it turns out, races and breeds standardbred horses in Truro. Contemplating retirement, he shared that he realized that he only had set out in life to work and had not done anything wild and free, pointing to me on the bike. And now he was witnessing friends retiring without their 40-year rhythm and routine. They suddenly were purposeless and faded away. I've heard this before. There are so many reasons to work. We all have varying responsibilities and commitments, and each one of us is the only one who can decide where and how much of our energy we put into different parts of our life. Some of us require more money, and some of us require more time or space. Danny gently expressed his concern and admiration for me as a solo traveling woman. He said he wasn't nearly as brave as me. I'm not so sure it's about bravery. I don't actually know what it is. Trust, intuition, belief in myself to have the smarts and skills to navigate everything I encounter. He referenced the mass shooting in April as an example, and we agreed that crazy things happen everywhere and a life lived in fear isn't much of a life at all. His first-hand accounts of what he saw as the killings unfolded from Porter Peak to Enfield were unnerving. From his home, he heard shots and could see the burning cars. Friends of his sons were at the gas station where the shooter was apprehended. It is all still so fresh, and the whole region is traumatized. I had anticipated conversations about the event, and my route directly travels the path of the shooter. Danny mentioned that times have changed, and I added that they always do. We heartily wished each other well, and I shoved off into the day. I was bound for Divert to find a Make My Way interpretive trail I rode through a busy, loud, and truck-filled industrial area. It was well worth the side trip. The stark contrast of the noisy trucks and Tim Hortons litter and the peace of native forest was exactly what I needed. The thing I always struggled the most with cycling is that the same roads that any of us get to bike down also are filled with vehicles, which means you're not really in the wilderness, even if you travel the remote gravel route up into northern Quebec and Labrador as I did years ago. There's always noise, there's always grime, and you can't just drink the ditch water. As I moved through the forest admiring the plant communities and interpretive panels, I found myself thinking of change in my conversation with Danny that morning. This land, McMurray, seems so much change. We're semi-nomadic, moved when necessary. Families and communities once lived, there are now giant steel buildings with razor wire fences. Some of the most important historical evidence of the peoples in this region were found right here in Divert. One sign spoke to connection of the peoples through the ages, not in the archaeological sense that divides groups of humans through time based on their tools and technology, but that everyone is connected, even through time, and everything changes. There's much more. And so it became abundantly clear to me in my journey on this trip was that I would receive a lot of first-hand accounts, a lot of second-hand accounts of what change is in this region. And this middle picture, I actually want to note, is a place, it's just outside of Five Islands. It's at the end of a road called Blue Sack Road. And it's where I spent the summer gathering fish samples of striped bass and Atlantic sturgeon on an honor species project. And there's a fish weir out there underwater that you can't see. And that I actually bumped into the daughter of the guy, Tony, that owns that weir that I got to know. She recognized me somehow. I have no idea how, with a mask on and everything. And that her father is very, very sick and that he will not continue fishing and his son will not inherit the fishing weir because he doesn't want it. And that I was able to, many, many years ago, witness what this place has been built on as a fishery for many generations. And so I took a time to go down and see this place that I had a personal connection to, that it will change. And change is inevitable. And the feeling of how much changes in the Bay of Fundy really became a central point of my trip. So, did make it to Cape Chignecto. So 7 days in, Hills of Note is a very select kind way of saying all of the expletives that raged out of me as I would claw my way up these hills. And yeah, there's hills obviously, but there are 3 particular places that there are hills of note. And Economy Mountain, that is right where Five Islands Provincial Park is, we've been there, Provincial Park is, that hill sucks. And I thought it was pretty funny to find this sign at Cape Chignecto, it's no walk in the park, and I worked my butt off to get there. It was just, there was that hill, but then there was all these other random hills on the way to Cape Chignecto, like Pancake Hill or Limekiln Hill, all these weird hills. I think it's actually been referred to as like a mini Cabot Trail, and it's kind of true. It's pretty intense biking, but I made it, which was awesome. So I'm going to transition from biking to hiking. My first transitions in all areas of life are always tricky, but because I was so organized beforehand, I was able to dump my car or my bike into the car and head out on the trail with these fine ladies. So we've got myself, we've got Jane, we've got Lara, and Leonie. And we had so much fun. And actually, I didn't realize until after this picture was taken. Can you read the caption on her shirt? I am not your mother, and I'm not your bitch. And it was awesome. So 3 moms ditched their families to come hike with me because this was their plan, and I just like kind of tagged in. And they made the reservations the day that the park opened. I would never have gotten this organized. The first day of school for all their kids was the day they got back from the trip. So they've never done it before, and it was super sweet to share this journey. We had beautiful weather. It was super awesome. I've lost track of how many times I've picked this trail, and I love it every single time. It's just super sweet and an honor to share it with people. Idaho, out in the middle, Deal I watched all the way around my whole trip, so I would see it. This is from the end of Cape Chignecto, and there it was out in the middle of the bay. I would see it slowly getting over my shoulder, and then watching it was always so funny. It's like, there you are, you bugger. Go for it. So, I mean, I don't mean to blast through Cape Chignecto, and it's really hard because there's 1,000 billion things I could say about every single part of this trip. But I made it through, and I decided, based on other trips I've done where rest days are not factored in, I was going to take a rest day. And I got watermelon from the people that I stayed with. I camped out on the beach, and I was super stoked because now I've officially transitioned from biking to hiking and back to biking. And so I set out on my bike. I now feel like I've kind of got this biking thing sorted out. I can bike on my own. This is cool. I'm feeling stronger. The aches and pains from biking on phase 1 were kind of actually supported and went away from hiking, and so I was feeling really good. And I made my way to the Joggins Interpretive Center. Who has been to Joggins to wander on that beach with all the fossils? So cool. And I am a bit of a nerd. And I had a great time. I booked a tour, and I'm also a huge plant person. And there are fossilized trees in the cliffs, and this little green scrubby thing, many of you have probably seen in forests around here, Sedum urbanse, it's horsetail. And one of the things I learned is that there were these giant old prehistoric horsetails that you can see the stem that the little guy is sitting in front of was actually its ancient relative. And I wrote a lot about this particular trip. It was very, very cool because as an educator, and I used to work in area botanical gardens, I would show so many people these little horsetails, and there used to be these prehistoric giant ones. And then I got to be on a tour with someone being like, this is the giant prehistoric one, and here's the little new one. And I was like, this is the best thing ever. I really recommend anybody going there. You don't have to go there to go there, but it's really, really sweet. And I look forward to going back because there's so much to learn, and I highly encourage booking in on a paid tour. It's really worth it. So Ride with GPS is super awesome, but I don't think it has a layer for factoring in global pandemics. And so my group that was going to take me away from the highway, because biking on a highway is no fun or even illegal, brought me way north of the Tantramar Marsh and like brought me around through this little tiny side road, and I rock up to the New Brunswick border, and it's closed. And there's no one there. And I was like, well, shit, I don't know. Like, someone was going to jump out of the bushes. And I'm like, no, you can't come into New Brunswick. But there was like a cow, and I mean, it's a gravel road, and so I was like, well, I don't know if you can see, but like the distance between the two barricades was like perfect for my bike. So I just kind of pushed myself through, and I was like, maybe I can't write about this. I don't know. Like, what do I do? I was like feeling like a little anxious. But I figured I could just go, and I did. So I made it into New Brunswick, and nothing happened. But then I was like, but what about when I come back into Nova Scotia? Like, I don't know what the paperwork is, and I'm like, whatever, in my own little world. But I made it back. I have to say, so my bike, her name is affectionately Black Beauty, and I talk about her a lot. For how many people have gone on a bike trip? I'm sorry, I didn't ask. Of any length. Yeah, your bike, at least my experience is your bike kind of becomes your bud. Like, your bike is everything. I used to be a crazy horse person, and so the Black Beauty reference is kind of lame. But this bike is awesome, and like, she's a cyclocross bike, so she can take a beating and handle all the gravel, which if I was on a normal touring bike, I would have been beat to smithereens with all the gravel. So I just had to give a nod to my super badass bike. Speaking of gravel, it sucks, especially when it's been freshly laid and it's really sharp and you think you're going to get a flat tire, because you wanted to hug the coastline and you're going to change your route that you planned. You're going to go way, way, way down this other peninsula that's going to be beautiful, and then you wind up getting your face rattled off, and you're exhausted. You stayed up really late the night before, hanging out with someone you met, drinking whiskey around a campfire, and you're like, oh God, this is so hard. But when you are able to work a little bit harder and go a little bit further, you're actually rewarded with beautiful things where there's no other people. And I wound up on this unknown kind of wildlife refuge thing that was covered in semi-palmated plovers that were getting ready to migrate. And it was really sunny and just peaceful. And then I wound up in these tops, like these blueberry fields, and you just never know where you're going to end up. And the beauty of traveling on a bicycle is that you are just completely exposed to the elements, and things that catch your attention you can stop and pull over and enjoy, which is very cool. So here I am, and I don't mean to have so many selfies, it's just a lot of my other pictures have like the killer finger in the way. And so this is the picture of me crossing in Moncton, the most northern point of my trip. I've been working so hard to get all the way up and all the way around in order to start heading down the other side of the Bay of Fundy. So I'm finally making it, and I just watched this whole shoreline from the other side. I worked like 30 kilometers up, and then go up this bridge and 30 kilometers down to Hopewell Rocks. How many people have been to the Hopewell Rocks? I've never been. So I grew up down in Maine, and I've spent most of my life, 10? Most of my life going through New Brunswick and not really getting to know very much of it at all. And so I really wanted to stop here. And so I'm like 2 weeks into my trip, and I get to go wander around the bottom of the sea. And because of COVID, there was like nobody there. It was amazing. And I'm 2 weeks in, and I'm feeling really grateful, and I'm feeling really good, and I'm in a rhythm, and I'm ready to take a break. And so I get to my dear friend Rebecca and Jonathan's farm that they're just starting in a little place called Riverside, Albert. And they're keeping bees, and they're building a wood-fired oven, and I just like got thrown into farm life. And we were moving beehives at midnight, and like it was not really restful, but it was amazing to see the passion of my dear friends pulling a new project together. And I got to sink my hands into the earth for a bit and harvest tomatoes because frost was coming, and pick flowers, and just kind of sleep in one spot for a couple nights was really amazing. And to be fed a lot of food, which was really amazing. Rebecca's an amazing cook. And I got to like really dive into beehives for the first time ever in my life, which I've always wanted to do. This picture on the right was, I learned like a beekeeping crash course with them. They didn't have the bucket in the right place, and so the bees just built this crazy mountain of comb, and the honey, we had to get rid of it. And it was so cool to see the social structure of these bees, and I really now understand that bees are like, they're more like keeping cows. And chickens, and they're not insects. They are, but they're so much more incredible. I think about honey very differently now. It's very educational. And I got to put on a bee suit. That was like a lifelong dream. It was very cool. And so then, to the funny footpath. So I left Rebecca and Jonathan's, and Eric was coming up from the city with all of my hiking stuff, and we stopped at the Holy Well Brewing Company. So this is part of like logistical thing to note if you want to go to the funny footpath. There's beer and coffee on the eastern side of the funny footpath, and then there's a great place to stay on the other side of the funny footpath. So I finally made it to the start of this place that I've wanted to go to for a million years. And I was very committed to having an unbusted human-powered connection for all of my transitions. So I biked all the way to the trailhead, and then Eric came and picked me up so we could then like base camp ourselves just for the night to get all of our gear organized, and then we were able to start out with leaving my bike in his car. And so here I am, made it all the way there after actually almost puking my guts out, getting up the hills in Fundy to get to the trailhead. They're epic, and it may have been because I had had a beer or two. But I still recommend stopping at the brewery. It's amazing. So I've been wanting to hike the funny footpath forever. Boarded several times, and there were quite a few hands that have hiked Cape Chignecto. What I would say is that the funny footpath is way harder. It is beautiful, and it gave to me the opportunity to appreciate the Maritimes even further, because we had the experience of feeling like, am I in New Zealand again? Am I out in BC? These hills are insane and like really wild, and like crazy intertidal crossings. It was really, really something else. I will happily talk to you about logistics if you are interested in this trip. I would do it again. I really, really would. So we took 4 days, and it was absolutely exquisite. And for me, like I was saying before, biking is hard because you're surrounded by cars and noise. And for the hiking trips, I chose to not vlog. Obviously, I like basically didn't take any pictures. I just wanted to be in the woods, because those were my rewards for basically biking to these hiking trips, was how I felt. And I had some amazing surprises, and some of them were tidal crossings that weren't supposed to be tidal crossings, kind of a scrabble along cliffs like a goat. And some of them were a very dear friend, France, who was here as well, showing up halfway down the trail, which I knew that was going to happen. But she brought Osa the dog too, which was a very sweet moment. It came around the corner. I was like, oh, that dog looks a lot like Osa. That dog's running towards me. Oh my God, it's Osa! It was so great. So I got to have my dear friends on this epic voyage and come join me for parts of this huge, bigger picture adventure. And the campsites were beautiful. France brought us steak, I will say. France brought us steak to eat, which is another testament to how amazing of her she is. And it was just incredible to share this journey with other people. Onwards. So we finished phase 4. There were some weird logistical things that happened because of the parkway closing at night at 5 o'clock, and I actually went home to do this whole extra run around. But we all fit. This car has all of us, the dog, all of our hiking gear, plus all of my cycling gear and all of my resupply and repair stuff if I needed it. Plus there's stuff tied on the roof. So it was like these amazing logistical feats. What I will say quickly is that there's the Fundy Footpath Hiker Shuttle Service is this really awesome woman that is on the St. Martin's end of the Fundy Footpath. She and her husband are super awesome. They'll help you out. There's the Not Your Average Hostel that is in St. Martin's, and they are fantastic, quirky, wonderful people that are totally worth staying at. And then a hurricane rolled in. So that was kind of another part of my logistical nightmare, was having to then go complete the last little bit of the hike because we had to get picked up because of all this weird stuff that happened. It was totally fine, but then I wound up biking the last 20 kilometers into St. Martin's in that hurricane, which was super exciting. But it was kind of fun because, you know, you only live maybe once, at least in this lifetime, so biking in a hurricane was awesome. So then after this, like the whole trip to this point, I've been feeling super awesome and like really uplifted, and then I just crashed. And I knew it was going to happen because I just like been with dear friends, and it was just like, wow. And I'm on day 28 and 29, and I've had a couple rest days, but I'm still far away from home, and I'm still living on the road, and I'm still making all these decisions. And I just was like so grouchy. I just was like happy to be out there, but I just wanted to like wear cotton. I just wanted to like, I don't know, like have a shower if I wanted to have a shower. And, you know, I was in these beautiful places, but it was just like really not into what I was doing. But I kept going, and I was also psychologically still going further away from home because I was going around the day. But, you know, you keep eating cheese and you keep eating chocolate, and you eventually go on a boat ride, and I made my way down towards the backside of St. John, and I popped out on these little cable ferries over the Canacasis River out onto the peninsula, and it's beautiful, and it's cool, and like, you know, you have to move through those crappy moments. It's like you have a hard day in normal life. You have a hard day on trip, and it's part of it. You find those reserves. And eventually, you start turning the corner to home. And I finally got on the ferry, and I made my way across the Bay of Fundy, and I just got to sit there and cover 80 kilometers without doing anything other than drinking coffee and eating ferry food, which was so good. And I had a chance to reflect on all the wonderful humans I had already met. And people had opened their homes and given me stuff that things I needed, things I didn't need, but they were just so excited to be part of my journey in any capacity that I was carried by them. And I was carried by this boat back to my home province. I made it, and I got some sunshine when I landed, which was super exciting because it was the only sunshine I would actually see for like 6 days. And I had another very dear friend, Holly, come down and meet me with food, and we went and camped out like down on Digby Neck somewhere, and I had to transition again between the bike into a car and then back onto the bike, and then she dutifully dropped me back where she picked me up in a pouring rainstorm for me to finish my last leg in my journey home through the Annapolis Valley. And so day 33, I come up to my third hill of note, which is in Bear River. I don't know if any of you spent time in Bear River. Epic hill on Bear River. And that hill actually is, of all of the hills that I saw, is the one in Bear River. And I even jettisoned a bunch of my stuff to Holly so I could just like get home and not feel as weighted down. But you know, like anything that's hard, when you accomplish it, you have that really serene sense of fortitude that carries forward. So I'm getting really close to home. I'm in Bridgewater, it's been pouring rain, and my dear friend Aunt Jeanette, who actually is part of the Whiskey Girls, so I feel like an honorary secondary whiskey girl one day. But I hear they're not taking applications. She came down to the bottom of the mountain and picked me up and whisked me away to feed me, and she herself has been on some epic trips, and she was the perfect person to meet me in that moment of like, here, have more food, here, let's like take care of you. If you want to shower, we don't need to talk. Like she just knew what I needed, which was absolutely gold because I was so close to home. I could have crushed the last distance if I wanted to. But I was sort of starting to approach that weird place of, oh, it's almost over. But do I want it to be over? What's waiting for me when I get back? This has been my life now. I'm not really sure. But I'm ready to be done. And so the thing that I started thinking about 3 weeks ago, this was Johnny's Burger. Who's been to Johnny's Burgers in Berwick? This is a burger that is worth biking around the Bay of Fundy for. And this burger is funny because I had a really crappy day biking in the pouring rain on the rail trail. Motorists were really mad. They were like just so mad there was a bike on the road. I had all this generosity and incredible experience with all these humans all the way around the Bay of Fundy. And I'm like within almost eyesight of my home community, and I'm feeling all this rage at me as a cyclist. I'm like, man, my whole trip has been incredible, and now I'm gonna have this bad flavor of like my home land. Like this is really unsatisfying, and I was a little worried about that. But that's what it was gonna be. But then the whole generosity of this incredible experience of Johnny, the man himself, introducing himself to me, telling his whole life story of recovery of health because of biking, losing 80 pounds in order to get healthy by a bike, and now he's making burgers, and we sat down and we chatted, and I ate the most glorious burger of my life. And he's like, "Here, put your tent behind the restaurant. That's fine. Where are you gonna sleep? It's dark." And then all of that like ungenerosity I've been feeling all day was like wiped clean. And then the next day the sun came out, and a guy that I stayed with, Scott Murphy, he came down, his wife and their kids dropped him off, and he watched me park up my yard sale for the last time. And he was my honor guard back to Wolfville, which was very, very cool. And I stopped down at the Jujuwaktuk or Cornwallis River as we know it here, because I was home. And I stood there 1,000 times on my bike, on my feet, for many years. And the craziest thing happened. I stood there long enough that the tide started dropping. It was very full when I got there, and it started to flow downstream. And I could feel the tide dropping in my body. Like I could feel the gravitational pull of that mass of water. Like I could feel it in my stomach. I've never experienced this before. And I could picture every single place I'd been in this water was going to get sucked out to like Minas Basin, out and around Blomidon, out into the Bay of Fundy. I could feel that. I've been living next to this place for so long and so intimately connected to the tides and the skies and the weather and the animals and the plants that I suddenly could see the whole world from my hometown. And I never felt that before. And that's the power of leaving on an adventure from the backyard, is you are suddenly connected to everything beyond you. And I made it home, which was very sweet. And no one was home, which was totally cool. And I was just like, what do I do? And I like found some flip-flops and I put those on, and I was like, oh, there's my mug in the cupboard. I like this mug. I guess I'll drink water out of my water bottle. Like my whole world was on Black Beauty. And my car was right where I left it. And I was done. I was totally done. It was amazing. But I wasn't. Because on my very last kilometer of my trip, of this day, I bumped into a friend who she and I had been scheming to go hike Cape Split for sunrise. And who's hiked Cape Split? Yes. Yeah. Hiked it a few times. So in the original map, you may have noticed the little blue squiggle that outlines Cape Split. So I had this idea like weeks before. I was like, oh, wouldn't it be cool? I could like hike Cape Split as part of this whole journey to like right out in the middle of the Bay of Fundy. Like, what an idea. But I was like, oh, I'm kind of tired, and I don't know, logistically that's getting complicated. No, Cape Split will be like a reflective post-trip. That's cool. And so I just left it at that. So Lindsay's coming out of a friend's house, happens to see me, and says, hey, it's full moon tomorrow. And in like 6 minutes, it's like, all right, come pick me up at 4 in the morning. So my trip wasn't over when I got home. Lindsay came and picked me up. We drove out to Cape Split, and we hiked out. I've never hiked that trail in the dark. And it was so warm and soft, and calm, and the trees were silvery in the moonlight. We hardly needed headlamps. And that's the moon setting off of the split. We brought all the coffee making supplies. I had no food with me at this point. I think I'm the sweaty cheese that I didn't really feel kind of sharing. But Lindsay had coffee, and she picked up some sweet treats from the farm market, and I brought the stove and a pot, so that was good. And we sat there drinking eggnog in our coffee, waiting for the sun, and the sun came up. And as we sat there, that's the color of the sun hitting the nose of Cape Split. And as we stood there, we could see the whole coastline and my whole route start to be revealed. And we're out there in the middle of all of it, and it felt so complete. And Lindsay went up to see if the sunrise was actually coming through the trees or not yet. And I turned around and I caught this picture of her coming down over the hill and the whole Bay of Fundy around us. And in that moment, I realized that I had gone full circle to come back to exactly where I needed to be. And I actually haven't written about this part of the trip yet. I'm kind of staving it off. I guess I wasn't ready. So as much as it is complete now, I'm still digesting it. And I would like to end with gratitude again for all of you for listening, all of the inspiration that I find in the natural world, and the speakers tonight, and all that we get to share together. So thank you.
Wow, what a great story. And that concludes this meeting of the Midnight Society.